This episode of The Biggest Table is brought to you in part by Wild Goose Coffee. Since 2008, Wild Goose has sought to build better communities through coffee. For our listeners, Wild Goose is offering a special promotion of 20% off a one-time order using the code TABLE at checkout. To learn more and to order coffee, please visit wildgoosecoffee.com. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Mark Johnson. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Biggest Table. I am your host, Andrew King. In this podcast, we explore the table, food, eating, and hospitality as an arena for experiencing God's love and our love for one another. And today, I'm joined by Mark Johnson. Originally from Milwaukee, Mark earned a PhD in history from the University of Alabama. Previously, he earned an MA from the University of Maryland and a BA from Purdue University. He currently teaches at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga and is the author of An Irresistible History of Alabama Barbecue from Wood Pit to White Sauce and Rough Tactics, Black Performance in Political Spectacle, 1877 to 1932. His most recent book is American Bacon, The History of a Food Phenomenon. He resides in Knoxville, Tennessee with his wife, Kate, and two cats, Peri and Remy. So thanks for joining me today, Mark. Really enjoyed your book on bacon and excited to talk about bacon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah. When I saw your book, and I forget how our paths crossed, probably, I had Adrian Miller, and so I think, algorithms, Indeed forced, luckily connected us. But when I saw that you were writing about bacon, I was like, okay, I don't know many people who write about bacon, but this is clearly a book I want to read and learn. And so yeah, thanks for, the opportunity to connect.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. And so as you're a historian, and so you've written two books now on food. And so as a historian, what piqued your interest in food and what led you to want to explore the history of food and the story that food might tell us?
Yeah, so when I was a grad student, I was working on a project that eventually became the book on Alabama barbecue. During my time there, the State Department of Tourism wanted to do a Year of Alabama Barbecue campaign, create the barbecue trail and create a bunch of promotional materials for tourism. But to do that, they needed to know what that meant. What does Alabama barbecue even mean? It's different, really, in the state, city to city. So they wanted the stories, they wanted the history behind it, and that project went to a UA professor and I. And then I just kept going. I really liked the way that I could tell sometimes really difficult stories about the past, but through food, sort of like a little bit of sugar helps the medicine go down sort of way, I guess. And just the way that food got tied up into everything. So I really enjoyed it as like a narrative device in communication, a method of communication, telling the stories I was already trying to tell people about immigration and migration or civil rights or globalization or industrialization and the rise and fall of liberalism and on and on and on. Then the second book actually isn't about food so much. It's the dissertation turned academic monograph book. But I turned my attention to bacon based on that first book. While I was interviewing a pitmaster in Alabama, he said that our obsession with bacon had gotten so out of hand that butchers were changing the size and shape of pork bellies, and that meant changing the size and shape of spare ribs, so that they could count more of the carcass as belly, which they could get for really high prices. So I got to thinking about that change over time and how it wasn't that long ago that we had just a fear of fat and dietary fat, things like the American Heart Association seal of approval showing up on Lucky Charms, right? And that we had the conventional wisdom told us that dietary fat made us fat. And that entailed a whole host of other chronic illnesses. So I think that's where, it was during the first book that I got this idea for this bacon book. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant or what it would look like. But a thread that runs through all three of them is this kind of way that people pretend to be other people. And so in the barbecue book, it was the anti-barbecue campaign, the way that politicians were using barbecue to communicate their humility, their being of the people and not better than the people, and a phenomenon that we still do today, right? You can't go on the electoral primaries without stopping into the barbecue joint or the ice cream shop, or doing the so-called everyday person thing. The second book, based on the dissertation, was about like faithful slave myth and Black Confederate mythology, and how you use performance to access otherwise unavailable spaces. And that's where the third book really took off, when I saw in the food writing about bacon, the way that people communicated ideas about cowboys and Westerners and mountain men, and times and places where supposedly men were men and women were women and everything was so much simpler. And so that's the thread I ended up picking up on and carrying through.
Because you say in your introduction that in the 21st century, bacon eaters have performed something akin to a minstrel performance when they eat bacon, talk about bacon, and write about bacon. And I think you were hinting at that, but it was a phrase that stood out for me in your book, because I was like, okay, like there's something here, and, we're not super familiar with minstrel performances anymore, and so what, can you unpack that? And like, because I think you've hinted at it, but I think it's an important thread, I think, that runs through the bacon book, for the listeners.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So, as a emerging scholar and grad student, that's really the phenomenon that I was interested in: minstrelsy, blackface minstrelsy, and a similar phenomenon, like Black musicians, for example, playing roles of faithful slaves or Black Confederates, to gain access to opportunity, even putting on their own minstrel performances. Basically, they argued, or reasoned, I should say, that if people were going to make money off of some version of Black culture, that they might as well be the ones making that money. And so that's really kind of the dynamic at the heart of the second book in my scholarly training, is what compels people to do these sorts of things. What compels people to, on one hand, dress up like the people that they claim and that they, by all accounts, despise or detest. What compels someone to dress up like a marginalized person, in that case, right? A caricature of an enslaved person, or a Black Southerner. So what compels you on that side, to so seemingly lower yourself or humble yourself? And then on the other side, in that book in particular, what compelled people to embrace, hateful, negative stereotypes, and play those roles? The most famous and probably the easiest one, maybe for the audience to understand, is Hattie McDaniel, right, playing Mammy in Gone with the Wind. embracing that sort of stereotype of mammy. And she's talked about that, right? Like, I played mammy, so I didn't have to be a mammy,
Hmm.
right? I didn't have to actually work in any white women's kitchens or raise any white women's babies. So yeah, that's kind of the thing I'm interested in, is the cultural phenomenon in which we kind of transcend or transgress racial or class boundaries. So in the Bacon book, there's one story in particular that really kind of unlocked this for me. And uh, it's a New York Times cartoon and an associated column. It's called In Praise of Bacon. It's by George T. Hawley from 1983. And the food writing is like his own version of like a minstrel performance, but instead of, right, an enslaved Black person, he's impersonating the Georgia Mountain Man. And through it, you get this sense of what scholars, and scholar Eric Lott in particular, called like this desire hate or hate envy dialectic. He's clearly mocking this Georgia Mountain Man, the raw boned mountain man that shoots the hog in self defense and has a coon hound. And right, so on the surface of this, it's very mocking of this person that's so much different than the author George Hawley in his New York apartment writing for the New York Times. But you do see the elements of this food writing that make this character that's so long been despised appealing for someone like Hawley. This is a person that works with his hands, still defends himself and his territory, still has kind of a martial spirit, right? To conquer the bacon, Hawley has to actually marshal his own military past, serving in the Marines, to like get out his pocket knife and break the bacon rind with his bare hands. And yeah, so I think this story really unraveled something about like modernity and civilization, right? Amid an otherwise urban, standard, uniform, routine, comfortable life, this provides a moment of play where he can escape to a different time and place that he doesn't really want to go to.
No.
No one wants to actually live like this Georgia Mountain Man as described in the article, but temporarily, you can see the appeal of it.
Because you mentioned that, bacon for many of us, in the 21st century carries this nostalgia. Like we think of lazy Saturday mornings. You mentioned even that in COVID, bacon sales spiked. We were all staying at home and looking for something familiar, reconnecting with our families. There's a nostalgia attached to this idea of bacon and, even just the odor, the smell of bacon frying at home. Like there's something that it connotes to us, but bacon's not as simple as that nostalgia. Like you even mentioned that for most of US history, bacon was a mundane staple, partly objectionable and even dangerous. And so like what, there's a lot of history to unpack, right? And we don't have time to go into all the details, but like, it started with the colonial people bringing pigs over and, cured pork with them as a means to continue to get meat. But even back then, Shakespeare uses bacon as an insult. So yeah, like there's multiple stories happening throughout, and so what in early American, like what role did bacon play?
Yeah, so in early America, bacon has kind of, what role did it play? Well, for everyone in an age before refrigeration, bacon's role is, a mundane staple, something that you cut off a hunk, every day and threw it in the pot of greens or in the stew or porridges or whatever you had going for the day to add much needed fat to your diet. Absolutely. Salt, maybe some smoky flavor, make improve the taste of vegetables or an otherwise humble, meager meal. And that's the role it had played for centuries prior, and the role it continued to play in the diets of most Europeans. At this time, bacon was a really broad term referring to most of the pork eaten by most of the people that had some combination of salting, curing, and or smoking. And it could refer to various parts of the pig too. At this time, it did not necessarily mean, like the belly or loin like it does today. Bacon just meant, any pork. In fact, it's actually easier to say what it's not. So bacon's not fresh meat.
Mm-hmm.
It's not ham because ham is prized, and it's not sausage. But otherwise, they're pretty much calling anything else bacon when they use that term. So, when the English start their colonial adventure into North America, bacon's just part of your existence like that. But at the time, there was emerging an idea that bacon was a little bit backward or especially suitable for laboring people. They have a few things going on. And I should mention again, everyone's still using it. It's just way too useful in the age before refrigeration that really no one can escape bacon and using it as a frying agent or to flavor vegetables or leaner meat. But you're able to distinguish yourself based on the variety in your diet and the amount of fresh meat or other so-called more respectable meat that you can get. It's kind of shades of gray at this time. So for the English, respectable meat meant beef and mutton in the late 1500s and 1600s. They really came to prize these animals because they benefit from the very nice, orderly, fenced-in farm that becomes a prize of becomes the pride of English civilization and a symbol of English civility and respectability to have these quaint fenced-in farms. They're also transitioning toward the raising of sheep for their emerging textile industries. These are two animals, cows and sheep, that also famously benefit from lots of husbandry, or that idea that they need a lot of care and attention. And again, the English use that as a symbol of kind of like their dominance over not only the land, fenced in, orderly, very Puritan idea to tame the wilderness and bring it under your control and civilize it. But these are animals that also benefit from that same kind of dominance and command. And so they become prized, and therefore their meat becomes prized, beef and mutton. The pig doesn't fit into this worldview. It takes care of itself, it feeds itself, and that's what makes it so useful, and had made it so useful for millennia, was the way it could defend itself against animals, eat an omnivorous diet, take care of itself, roaming the wilderness, eating, acorns and digging up grubs and stuff like that. But in this English mindset, the pig just seems like a remnant of its own uncivilized past. And so they have another thing going on. The English are urbanizing quickly because these cows and these sheep don't need as many people. And peasants are looking for work in the city. And cities are places, paradoxically, where even at that time, as of now, that people can get more variety in their diet. In the cities, we've got grocery stores today. Back then, they had the marketplaces that were popping up all over England's biggest cities. And that meant more variety, more availability of fresh meat. And so these urban people who could get their hands on some variety distinguished themselves as such and started to refer to country people and laboring people, people who worked with their bodies in particular, as bacon eaters or chaw bacons, people that seem to rely exclusively on bacon to sustain themselves through that kind of day of work.
Yeah. And then but then as the colonial expansion happened in America and westward, bacon became sort of a pride thing of like, hey, we're not like these, restrained Europeans, or it became sort of it testified to an independent and freedom loving spirit over and against what the English in Europe represented at the time, which is fascinating. That's what you've hinted at, that this is the love of bacon now harkens back to this freedom and independent loving spirit.
Yeah, the self-sufficient kind of hardworking laboring person for sure. Yeah, so after the American Revolution, Americans are confronting something like bacon, and they kind of divide into two camps about it. They've brought with them this cultural baggage that says that bacon's backward, bacon's for laboring people, and that respectable societies and civilization has moved on to beef and mutton as the indicators of taste and class. And some people certainly carry that baggage with them, and look around them and see the nation's country people, and especially its southern people, especially southern enslaved people, as bacon eaters, as backward, as lacking taste and respectability. But yeah, as you hinted at, and in the book, it's truly just a hint because it's not a total overhaul, not quite yet. But there are hints of this reclaiming bacon as a virtuous food for hardworking, laboring people. Right. In this context, many Americans look at Europe as too urban, too decadent, too over-civilized is the word that they would use. An idea that they've inherited from their kind of Puritan forebears, that history is not linear, it's actually cyclical, and that civilizations become over-civilized, they become soft, greedy, corrupt, and then the devil gets them and they fall. So in this context, yeah, bacon does have a little bit of a role in the American imagination as a symbol of humility and virtue. I think the best story from that specific section is debates over, so bacon gets caught up in the debates over the Bank of the United States. This is like my 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon moment. But yeah, so this opposition newspaper to Hamilton and the Federalists, says something to the effect of that the Bank of the United States will certainly make the United States wealthy. Absolutely. It's modeled after the way like the British Treasury would work. So they admit that like Hamilton's plan would make the United States wealthy, but they actually compare Hamilton to King Midas and the Golden Touch. Like at what cost though, right? He can make us wealthy with this plan, but at what cost? What might we lose? And for them, it's just not worth it. They implore Hamilton to leave us to our cabbage and bacon, right? A humble meal for a humble people. No frills, right? Not overwrought or over sophisticated. So Americans, they do embrace their provincialism in comparison to Europe, their rustic virtue, their hardworking, laboring spirits, their lack of fashion, right? They wear as sort of a badge of honor. And that's where, right, reclaiming that song Yankee Doodle comes into play, right?
Yeah.
Meant as mocking them for their provincialism, their country bumpkinness. But yeah, some Americans, they're starting to reclaim that kind of character, that kind of spirit. And in some of those debates, some of those ideas come out through expressions about bacon as a perfectly suitable, perfectly adequate meal for someone like that.
Right. It's bacon's suitable for the hardworking, blue collar person.
Mhm.
But, there comes a moment that you point out in the book where like the northern population, white collar, maybe not white collar yet, but like they're moving away from bacon and, embracing more beef, a beef diet, and begin to sort of look down on the South as, stuck in the past, not progressing as they should. And this carries even through the Civil War, and so like it seems through the book that like as America progresses and they experience huge economic boom, post World War or post Civil War and the Industrial Revolution, post World War II, and all the new technology coming, that bacon takes a back seat. That bacon begins to be looked down upon as something uncivilized, uncouth, unsafe, and like, am I picking up the wrong theme? But or like, like
No,
what?
absolutely. Yeah, during the course of the 19th century, northern urbanites, even the humbler classes, boast about the amount of beef that they can get on their plates. And that only increases by the end of the 19th century, during the wave of immigration famous to most of us that we learned in school, right? The arrival of like Eastern Europeans and Irish and Italian people toward the end of the 19th century and early 20th century. Yeah, I mean, they're writing back home about the amount of meat and the variety of meat available to them, even to someone like them that, lives a pretty humble existence. Yeah, so in the northern states, even early, but especially toward the end of the 19th century, they're getting tied to the industrial food system and emerging technologies like refrigerated rail cars and um, stuff of that sort. So they can get variety. They can get these more so-called respectable meats, especially beef. Beef's the primary indicator of like civilization and taste and respectability. And the roast beef per English taste becomes like a key staple of the diet. I should mention that they're still eating plenty of bacon. It's just way too useful in
Right.
this age before widespread refrigeration to get rid of it altogether. But they are able to get their hands on taste and respectability. So they do. Um, and in that context, they're looking at the places that are still cut off from the emerging industrial food system, that aren't quite as tied to the meatpacking centers of Cincinnati and then by mid-century Chicago, that can give them fresh beef in their local market. They look at these places cut off from this or on the outskirts of this system as, backward, as remaining underdeveloped in kind of the word of the time. By the end of the century, right, the United States is increasingly starting to exercise some imperial might, encounter people around the world who are, so seemingly primitive, as they would say. But it's really cause for concern that a region in their own country, like the Appalachian South, seems stuck in what they would say is the pioneer stage of development.
Mm-hmm.
In the pioneer stage of development, because civilizations progress, right,
Yeah.
toward, perfect civilization, as the story goes. In the pioneer stage of development, bacon absolutely works, and they wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. They're just concerned that there's a region in the country, the Appalachian South, the Mountain South general, so like the Ozarks, the Deep South, that it's still stuck in this stage because they've moved on. They've moved on to urbanness and taste and respectability. So they go south, they go into the mountains looking to reform the people. They're not looking at this stuck in the pastness way of existence as anything charming or authentic or especially honest or virtuous. I mean, there's hints of that sort of stuff in the writing. You can't be anything but impressed by like the mountains and the beauty of it all, right? And the independence of spirit. But really, you should get your act together and get with the game and jump into modernity with the rest of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And in that mindset, with that mindset, they're still looking at their bacon eating as a symbol of their backwardness.
Hmm.
They're still stuck in the bacon eating stage where they really should have moved on by now.
Right. And then we, fast forward, we have this age of restraint. We're coming into post World War II, and the emergence, industrial food system has fully taken over. Processed foods are a sign of respectability um, at this moment, and they're trying to figure out the perfect diet. Exotic, spicy foods are looked down upon. You mentioned that, we're wanting a diet that is almost void of pleasure and taste, and just how do we become the perfect human to continue towards progression, it feels like. And so bacon becomes a sign of fat, of obesity, of unhealth. And you even mentioned that bacon is almost banned, which, I was mentioning this to my wife and she's like, what? Like bacon's almost banned? Like, why would people ban bacon? And so like, what led us as a nation to almost say, hey, no bacon, which I think may have caused another revolt. If the government tried to ban bacon today, you would probably have a lot of people up in arms. But why was bacon looked down upon to the point that government looked at banning it?
Yeah, so by the 20th century, bacon has a reputation for being suitable for laboring people, this remnant of the past for people in the pioneer stage of development, especially, these seemingly backward Southerners and mountain people, as they would say it. By the 20th century, though, its fattiness plays a role in the way that it's despised. We have a simple, for us, the conventional wisdom says that fat makes people fat, right? And that was an idea really prevalent in the 20th century, and that you had to eliminate dietary fat from your diet, giving rise to things like the Mediterranean diet or and similar low-fat diets. Yeah, so in this context, bacon's reputation is only going to get worse. It's too fatty for this new age where we don't work with our bodies. We sit at desks and look at our, computer screens or do, reports on paper all day. So in that context, bacon's reputation is going to suffer. It was still suitable for the cowboy, but not suitable for the desk worker. But then we learn about the dangers of nitrites and nitrates, which I should mention are the chemicals that we've used for millennia to cure bacon. The ancient Romans and ancient Chinese used these chemicals without really knowing it, right? They didn't have the chemical composition, and the science for that. But they knew that, salt from certain caves worked better or gave a better appearance and texture and taste to it, helped it stay safe longer. And they were effectively using, salt that was combined with nitrites and nitrates. And, they would refer to it eventually as things like saltpeter.
Mm-hmm.
But in the 20th century, we learn about the dangers of this stuff. So this stuff, when combined with high heat and amino acids, forms cancer-causing elements called nitrosamines. And that leads the World Health Organization to classify them as like a class 1 carcinogen or a group 1 carcinogen. And that makes headlines. That's going to be, printed everywhere. Bacon causes cancer.
Right.
And in this new world of refrigeration, people are wondering, bacon got us through the first, 10,000 years, right? But maybe it doesn't have a purpose anymore. Maybe we should be choosing things that don't make us fat and don't cause cancer. And we
And
can get those things because we all have a refrigerator now, right?
yep.
And it's the United States, and so the economy is just booming. Um, and we can get our hands on pretty much anything we want. And so, yeah, in this mindset, bacon does. It seems like it's reached the end of its like life cycle. It's reached the end of its usefulness for us. And there are food writers that say as much. Florence Fabricant of the New York Times, really famous food writer. She says that, bacon has a role to add some, flavor to a meal, but use as little as possible, right? It should play a subtle role in your cuisine. And maybe that's it. And maybe that's not, maybe that even is too much. That you could get the same benefits from something leaner. Yeah, so by the end of the 20th century, there's a few things going on. By 1977, the USDA convened a subcommittee to consider banning bacon because of the nitrates and nitrites. This is part of the work of Dr. Michael F. Jacobson of MIT and the Center for Science in the Public Interest. He calls bacon the most dangerous food in the supermarket. By the 90s, one nutritionist quoted in Newsweek magazine says that bacon's not even food. It's not even in the food pyramid that had just come out
Right.
because it's a salt-ridden, fat-laden, carcinogenic thing. Not even a food. And I see a lot of that rhetoric now
Hmm.
about like certain foods aren't even food anymore for
Right.
us. They don't count as food, and that's a whole different thing. But bacon gets put in that category. Yeah, so by the 80s and 90s, the National Pork Board has its own marketing campaign, The Other White Meat,
I remember it well.
um,
Yes.
which doesn't have a role for bacon. In fact, in the
Yeah.
National Pork Board's own literature, they're going to recommend to you how to substitute out bacon in your favorite recipes
Hmm.
for a different pork product, like a pork loin or pork chop or something chopped up and thrown in the greens or the stew or whatever it was. Their basic hope is that you won't go all the way to chicken, right? The boneless, skinless chicken breast.
Right.
That you'll still eat pork, but they're trying to kind of out chicken
Hmm.
and play this lean game, play this fat-free game with people in the grocery stores. And pork just really can't compete that way because lean pork doesn't taste all that great. It gets its flavor from like the fat caps and the intramuscular fat. And so even lean pork, like pork chops, has to have fat in it to taste good. So in the end, we all ended up with a hog that we actually didn't end up wanting.
Right.
And pork bellies, the part that makes bacon in the United States, are so cheap that we give them away as foreign food aid. And industry insiders call them a drag on the carcass because they
Hmm.
just don't fetch anything when they weigh and measure the hog carcass at slaughtering time so that they can pay the farmers. And that's, I mean, bacon's at pretty much its lowest possible point.
So then what moments, caused this resurgent, where now like bacon, you know, you start seeing it everywhere on fast food, burgers, um, Atkins diet, the Atkins diet, I think, that's mid 90s, starts coming about. So like, what was it that like what was happening culturally that, spurred us to then fall back in love with bacon? Because it's more than just it tastes good. I think there's something, you quote an author in the beginning that, bacon in the refrigerated age, bacon has no purpose save for pleasure. Um,
Yeah, when the National Pork Board and the bacon producers started playing that game, they really struck a winner. So we have a few things going on that make us receptible to this. This is kind of a debate we have in food studies, like who creates demand, right? Do consumers create demand or do producers create demand right through what they make and what they market and how they market it. And so we got to look at both sides of this. What made us open to bacon again? What made us ready to receive it? So we're by the 90s and early aughts, we're first of all fed up with the government dietary advice. We've had the Reagan Revolution, and we're just fed up with government expertise because that government expertise seems corrupt. It seems to change every day, right? And all these studies seem funded by, the parties that will benefit. And we're just so skeptical of it all. In fact, this is part of what made, across the spectrum, Kennedy and Maha so appealing to a lot of kind of healthy food kind of people that, something Kennedy said was that we're going to get rid of the special interests when we're making our dietary advice, our dietary guidelines to the people. He didn't. The new food pyramid has plenty of footnotes with the sponsors and co-sponsors and people who had a voice at the table. But we were interested in that. We were interested in ideas that might work. I mean, we had this low-fat dieting, which doesn't taste any good, and it didn't work, right? Not only for the individual, but on a social level, it didn't work because we had just continuing to increase rates of diabetes, heart disease, heart attacks, obesity. So we've been told one thing, it didn't work. We lose faith in the experts. We're just ready for someone to come. We're ready for those kind of people that come in and say, doctors don't want you to know.
Right.
That kind of rhetoric starts to gain traction. And that's where the Atkins diet kind of plays a role. It actually is created much earlier, but it doesn't take off until, as you mentioned, the 90s. So we're ready to try something else. Plus it tastes good. We can eat as much meat as we want. We feel liberated by it, even though we're restrained to that one category.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, Dr. Atkins would say that bacon doesn't count because of the nitrates and nitrites. He would rather see you eat fresh meat or uncured meat. But nonetheless, in the popular imagination, bacon and eggs go together with Atkins, these protein-heavy diets, low-carb dieting. So bacon gets a boost from that. It gets a boost from this kind of screw you attitude that we've got toward dietary scientists and government regulation, precisely because bacon had been public enemy number one. These are groups that had made bacon their target. And so when we're ready to kind of push back against them, push back against the science, against, these so-called experts that want to tell us what to do, bacon is the most readily available symbol then of something that they specifically told us not to eat. So we're going to eat it. But then, kind of rediscovering bacon for the way that it had played a role in our cuisine for millennia. And that's in smaller amounts to add pleasure, to extend a meal, to add fat, add flavor, add some salt to a meal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, back then, right, they were adding it to, I've said it a few times, the greens, the porridges, the stews. But we're going to add it to the donut and the Bacon Club Chalupa and the Baconator, because pork bellies are so cheap that fast food can get them for next to nothing, right? Get bacon for next to nothing, add fat and salt, which fast food is going to love to do,
right?
Because it tastes good, right? We get addicted to it and we just want more and more of it. And they get to advertise, cachet and excitement and interestingness, and jack up the price, many times over what they actually paid for it. And so I think it's interesting that we rediscovered these ways to eat small amounts of bacon as toppings and flavorings. Uh, I should mention that plenty of people had no need to rediscover it because they're marginalized. So they
Right.
had to, with economy, marshal their resources and still save the bacon grease.
Hmm.
Um, that's something that we rediscover as like middle class white Americans. In the food writing, people are like, "Did you know you could save the bacon grease?" It's like, yeah, there are plenty of people that never forgot that.
No.
But for a certain class of person, they needed to be retold that they could do that and make delicious things with it. And now we're just going to push that further, right? We're going
Right.
to bacon wash our bourbons, right,
Hmm.
for a bacon old fashioned or something like that. Um, so yeah, we find ways to use this little bit of bacon at a time. Like a bacon donut can't really have that much bacon on it, right?
Right.
Um, and so we know we're supposed to eat small amounts. Check. Um, if we eat it at all. Um, and so it does. It gets caught up in, well, I'm already kind of like sinning. I'm already kind of cheating on my diet. Might as well have some bacon too.
Right. And then you have the, new cuisine. I remember when I started cooking professionally in 2008, I was working at a restaurant in LA. Pork belly was all the rage. Every menu had to have a pork belly, and it wasn't
Hmm.
bacon, but it was, they, we braised it or cooked it sous vide, and, you slice it and you pan fry it and it's delicious. But then you have the rise of Southern cuisine, that's reimagining. And I think, again, like you mentioned, it harkens back to this lore of American history, but without the paying true homage to what bacon may have represented. Um,
Yeah, over the late 20th century, the in fashion haute cuisine.
mhm.
So we've turned our back, at least in the United States, and kind of like the French haute cuisine with its just like mountains of butter, right? Isn't it Monte le Beurre in your
Yeah,
sauces, right? To just like you reduce the sauce to nothing and then you build it back up with
the
butter.
butter. Yes.
Um, yeah, we've kind of turned our backs on like French haute cuisine. First of all, it's too snobby and too pretentious. But yeah, we also have these concerns about like fat and health. So the in fashion haute cuisine is like the chez panisse style. Oh, you don't need all that seasoning and butter if you were to just get a local carrot, right, or
Right.
a local tomato or
Yeah.
something, because it tastes so good. You actually should do minimally to it. You should do as little as possible to it. Um, we kind of we're increasingly mocking the haute cuisine, and especially these, the California cuisine, the Nouvelle cuisine, and then molecular gastronomy, especially as kind of uh, we like to mock the small portions at these places. Um, we like to, like the molecular gastronomy, it's overwrought, overcomplicated. Nothing's familiar. Everything comes with a foam,
Right.
right? Everything's made in a centrifuge. So, yeah, I think, this fine dining Southern cuisine is the reaction.
Hmm.
It's food that to to most Americans would look like food and taste like food, right? Pork chops and cornbread and greens and bourbon, and it's served in its rustic aesthetic, cotton weave cloth, in wood bowls and cast iron.
Hmm.
Um, but we're paying a lot for it
Right.
at these southern fine dining restaurants, and so we're still like we're eating the food of humble people because at least it's not haute cuisine, right? And this is what my friend Margot Finn, author of Discriminating Taste, would say is like we're turning our attention to these cuisines because they allow us to evoke like a sense of democracy or a sense of solidarity with people. because it doesn't look pretentious, right? It doesn't taste pretentious, but it is at a price point out of reach for most
Right.
people, especially the people it claims to romanticize. And yeah, bacon will play a huge role in this new turn, right? Because it signals humility. It signals like back to the land and knowing your producer. Craft bacon just explodes. And
Hmm.
the scholar Brad Weiss did a great book on like heritage breed hogs and their aesthetic in Western North Carolina. And so we can reconcile a lot of values. Oh, we're eating the food of marginalized people, or we're not eating that fancy. We know our producer, and our producer practices these, humane tactics. Of free range or pasture raising, heritage breeds. This isn't a commodity animal.
Hmm.
Humanely taken care of. And I get to know my producer like people in ye olde days supposedly did. And so we can reconcile all these values and make us feel good about our consumption again. And again, this stuff costs more than the stuff at the grocery store. And so it's out of reach of the actual people that you're claiming to be embodying.
I love that phrase. Like, yeah, it gives us a sense of comfort without actually putting us in proximity to the people we actually want it to represent. Um,
Yeah, in the United States, we eat plenty of cuisines of people that we like don't like
yeah.
as a society, right? Um, it got me thinking about it. When all these stories about people who would go into Mexican restaurants and just write nasty things instead of leaving tips, about like Trump deporting people, right? Like, um, and so yeah, as scholars in food studies, we are very interested in what compels us to eat foods of marginalized people, and what are the opportunities, and we shouldn't throw that part out. What are the opportunities for solidarity with these people? uh, but it doesn't make us actually very democratic or worldly to like eat Thai, right?
Mhm.
Plenty of people eat Thai that don't want to actually live next to or go to school with immigrants. Um, so yeah, that's something that the Bacon book tries to unravel at least a little bit. The extent of solidarity with the mountain man and what that means, and but how people continue to caricature them for their own needs.
Mhm. And so I'm curious, like, because in this moment when, political divisiveness is strife, we're seeing economic disparities galore, um, you know, racial issues are, like, as a food historian and, what do you hope food and the table can do for us as a people beyond just making us look good at the most fashionable restaurant? Because we can all, whatever, like, I love eating out, but ultimately, where can food push us towards solidarity?
Yeah, I mean, I hope the one step is to actually like learn and care about the people that whose cuisine you're enjoying, um, but actually like eat with and among those people. And there's a hierarchy when you go into the restaurant and you're the customer.
Hmm.
So break those bonds down, and make sure, yeah, that you're not just exploiting people to satisfy your own pleasures. And I think that's the opportunity, right? That these cuisines, and these global cuisines offer us, or these, the sort of reclaiming of these humble cuisines here at home.
Hmm.
Appalachian cuisine is having its own moment. Um, it has been for a couple decades now.
Hmm.
Um, but it doesn't necessarily lead to any meaningful like change for the actual people of the Mountain South, who can actually like live the way that you're describing when we describe this mythic mountain past. Barbara Kingsolver, for example, the novelist, said something about Appalachia as a place where it rains and spring water bubbles out of the ground. It's like Appalachia's dealt with way too much mining, that you shouldn't be drinking the spring water that comes out of the ground.
Right.
Like that, and like we have things like at Husk, the Kentucky Yaki, which is like the bourbon barrel aged soy sauces, glazed on pig's ears. Seemingly, put off as how people used to eat, but like now those very people are the ones who are tied more than ever to the industrialized food system.
Right.
As a bitter Southerner author wrote a few years ago, that, the people of the Mountain South, they're, eating white bread and Skippy peanut butter and Lay's potato chips, and, they're living in the food deserts, so we portray Appalachia as this place of abundance and freshness, but have all these food deserts.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think policy instead of gestures of solidarity are the things we need.
Like you mentioned, the policy, solidarity, versus just this romanticized ideas, and exploitation. I think I even remember hearing when, quinoa was becoming all the rage from, the Andes, it actually decimated their food culture, and they were eating more processed foods, and it wasn't leading to the health of their communities as we ate more quinoa.
I actually know the person that wrote the quinoa book. It's my friend at UTC, Emma McDonald.
Okay.
So that didn't actually happen.
No.
Like Andean farmers still grew plenty of quinoa, like for themselves.
Okay.
They didn't. But yeah, what you're referring to is that, like on the farms of the United States, right? Like you just drive through hours and hours of like corn that's not meant for the table, right? It's meant for ethanol and corn syrup or soy, right? All this soy, just dominating the fields. So that does absolutely happen. In the Andes, though, at least according to her, like ethnography, people still reserved plenty of quinoa for themselves.
Okay.
But the fact is, yeah, we do. There's still a truth in the story anyway. I should have led with that, and that these people do eat, humble, meager meals, whereas we get to eat it as like a superfood, right? It's supposedly going to solve all of our problems.
Yeah. And then you're also seeing the rise of indigenous chefs here in America from, Sean Sherman, Nephi Craig, and others highlighting it. And hopefully that helps bring, new resources for the indigenous people who are just decimated by food deserts and food insecurity. I live in Flagstaff, right near the Navajo Nation, near the Apache, and in Flagstaff, which is, people would claim, our high cost of living, it's expensive to live here, but food insecurity is high at a higher percentage than the national rate. And then you go to the Navajo Nation or the Apache people, and it's 5 to 7% higher than the national average, if not more. And so how do we continue to be aware of the stories food tells, and learn and grow and enjoy the beauty of it, but while also then helping raise that, food security for the people that need it most.
Yeah. What does it mean to, extract from a culture what you want,
right?
But, don't take the other parts with it, right?
Yeah.
That's where we need the like systemic changes, make sure that people have like ownership, people have claims, that the dollars circulate in the right places, and that it's not just being extracted from its geographical and cultural space, to satisfy our pleasures. That's what Lisa Heltke would call like culinary colonialism.
Right.
And yeah, there's an absolute opportunity, for these cuisines, as long as we pay attention to like the systemic um, issues, that people are compensated, that people are employed and valued for their labor. And if that's an in, then that's fantastic.
And so as you've written about bacon, and your book does paint that story of like, okay, what is the complicated history and what do we need to know and how can we help change issues? Like what's your hope as people read about bacon? Like what do you hope people come away with it or change or, like if you could wave a magic wand?
I mean, I think the big takeaway, as a historian generally, is I want students to understand that just stuff changes over time. I think, I saw a meme to that extent, not long ago, where it's like some brand new thing is actually as old as time, right? And like something you think is as old as time was actually invented in like the 1980s. I think it was like about ciabatta, right? Like, oh, ciabatta, this like artisanal bread that the medieval Italians would have like made, right? It's like from the 1980s because he wanted something that was like baguettes. So yeah, just like be prepared to understand that things change over time and that things haven't always been the way they are now, and embrace that story of change, because if you do, then future changes won't bother you so much. Right? Like we have all these things going on right now in our politics, like, oh, we're overturning millennia of doing things one way. It's like, well, that's not true. um it's always been changing, and if you recognize that, then you'll be more comfortable with the next change, whatever that might be, in whatever realm that might be, whether it's in our politics or our culture or our food or music. It won't be so unsuspecting.
No, I appreciate it. And as we wrap up, some fun questions about food. And
Sure.
I'm curious, uh, your responses. What's one food you refuse to eat?
Um, Gosh, I don't think I have anything like that I've refused in a very long time.
Okay.
But I'm not. You're not going to see like peas
Okay.
in my refrigerator or freezer.
Okay.
If they're yours and they're offered to me, I will happily gobble them up. But I have chosen other things.
Fair enough. Fair enough. What's one of the best things you've ever eaten?
One of the best things I've ever eaten. Um, let's like so. I mean, I've been on this kick lately, and like maybe I'm just being contrarian in our own moment, but I'm here to like raise the flag for the processed food right now.
Okay.
Like, let's not lose sight of the pleasures that an Oreo can give you.
Right.
It's
And
so
yeah.
good. Like, get over it.
Yeah. Especially
Like,
the
so
have you
I'm
tried
all about like Oreos and Doritos right now. Like,
yeah. Have you tried the new Reese's Oreos?
I have not.
So
They are moving a little too fast with their varieties
they
for
yes.
me to stay up to date on what's actually new and what's been around for 10 years.
Right.
But yeah, like we're living at a time, like we think that someone that eats bacon every day is just absolutely living the life. But let's go back and ask the people who ate bacon every day.
Right.
And they were ready to literally eat anything else.
Yeah. Yes.
They would marvel at an Oreo.
Right. Yeah.
So let's marvel at the Oreo.
Fair. Yes. No. There is Oreo. There is something beautiful about an Oreo, and the Reese's peanut butter Oreos are quite delicious. If you see them, they're worth a find. I did see Oreo was coming out and has come out with like a firecracker Oreo, which is like the firecracker popsicle in an Oreo flavor, which to me feels a little too much, but to each their own.
What a time to be alive.
Right. And finally, there's a conversation among chefs about last meals, as in if you knew you only had one more meal left to enjoy, what would it be? So if Mark had one last meal, what might be on your table?
Oh, I should have been prepared for this because yes, I've seen this going on.
Right.
And I've been thinking about how I would use it like in class, like the videos on YouTube
Mm-hmm.
of people
Yep.
describing their last meals. Like, what are you hoping to communicate through your last meal, right?
Mm-hmm.
What, maybe legacy do you want to leave or who do you want to honor? So I guess that's how I think about it. Like, so I guess I'm going to overthink it. But I'm
You,
also going to say, like, I would honor, where I'm from. And like, like the first things that popped to mind are like, homemade German potato salad and like a brat with like mustard and sour. I mean, I was just in Wisconsin, so that's what's
yeah,
coming up.
for sure.
But like I, especially something like us like that, it's like, no, I would not put that objectively, like the bratwurst, for example, as like objectively the best food I could possibly eat, but as like a best food in that moment. I think that would work.
Right. No, I think I got this question. I remember it because there was a cookbook. This came out, 2008, 2009, where they asked all the chefs what their last meals would be. And, Gordon Ramsay, Mario Batali at the time. And
Okay.
most of them wanted their mom's comfort foods, which I think is a fascinating look. Okay. Like you said, if we're thinking about what our last meal is, what do we want to communicate or what do we want to remember? It's the nostalgia. It's the family meals around the table, whereas these chefs have access and have eaten more fine food than you and I could ever imagine. And so yet
Right.
they still crave their mom's spaghetti and meatballs or meatloaf.
Or at least they want to be known as craving their mom's
Yes, maybe.
spaghetti.
Yeah.
I'm too skeptical, maybe, for the question.
There you go. Fair enough. Fair enough. You are a historian, yes, fair enough. Well, Mark, I've appreciated this conversation. I appreciate the history, the stories. And so if people want to learn more about your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find the book American Bacon at hopefully your local bookseller, but also on online retailers. But you can reach me on Instagram at Bacon Scholar, or through the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga.
Awesome. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with others. Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Biggest Table, where we explore what it means to be transformed by God's love around the table and through food. Until next time, bye.